Peter. Hi everybody, welcome to Monday Night Live, this time with my great friend Paul McGee. I'm Derek Arden. I'm delighted to invite you to join us both on YouTube and on the Negotiations podcast. Paul, welcome. Thanks very much for joining us. I must tell you a little bit about Paul. Paul is the author of this book, S.U.M.O. He's just writing his 13th book, which is absolutely fantastic. And I first saw this book after I met Paul, but I first saw it in Brisbane Airport when I was on a trip to Australia. And I thought, wow, a friend of mine in Brisbane and seeing his book. So I put it at number one, as you do. That's what we do for fellow professional speakers. We move it to number one and hope no one's watching us, took a photograph of it and sent it to Paul. Paul's got a great story and he's going to share lots of information with us, including how he wrote S.U.M.O, how he came across S.U.M.O, and also the work he did with Manchester City, because I know there's some football fans on here, even if Paul is really a Wigan or Bradford City supporter. I don't really understand the link between Wigan and Bradford, but we'll come to that. Paul, welcome. Tell us, how did you get into this business of speaking and writing?
Okay, Derek, well, it's great to see you and everyone else on the call. My background, is psychology and beef burgers. That's kind of it in a nutshell. And after I graduated from Bradford University, which is where then the contact with Bradford City, so I started watching them. I got a job working for Unilever graduate management trainee scheme, and I worked with one of their companies, Bird's Eye Walls. And I specialise in HR, and the first 6 months of my job, I'm in an office, I'm pushing pen and paper. Folks, then I had a life-changing conversation with the factory manager. He said, you know what's going to be really good for your development if you spend some time actually in the factory managing the 30 women on the economy beef burger line. And I'm like, yeah, bring it on. And the two main lessons were, number one, don't eat economy beef burgers because I know what goes into them. And secondly, when arrogance meets ignorance, that's a pretty dangerous cocktail. And I was both, because I actually thought managing 30 women should be relatively straightforward, because I've got a degree, got a background in psychology, and I've trained and worked as a probation officer, where I first met Will Kintish, but we won't go there. Anyway, within 12 months of working for Bird's Eye as a Unilever trainee, and that year in 1987, they took on 4 graduates in the whole of the UK to specialise in HR, and I was one of them. And within 12 months, I've lost my job through ill health. I became ill with something called ME, or myalgic encephalomyelitis. I think in the States you call it chronic fatigue syndrome. Derek, I was ill for 3 years. Wow. After 3 years, I thought maybe I could work again, maybe just part-time. No one had hired me, couldn't pass a medical. So I hired myself, passed my own medical. That was in 1991, 30 years ago. It's taken me 30 years to become an overnight success. And it was evolution rather than revolution in terms, I was in training, and then eventually someone asked me to do a one-day seminar for an American company called Career Track. And then one day someone said, would you do a keynote for an hour? I didn't even know what a flipping keynote was, but I spoke for an hour, and bizarrely, that wasn't for the money that I was in this. I got paid more for speaking for an hour than I did for doing a whole seminar for a day. And then it just evolved. And there's an organization that you're involved in, and Will's involved in, and maybe one or two others, called the Professional Speakers Association. That's set up early 2000. I was a founder member, and 21 years later, I'm still a member of that organization. So that's kind of a little bit banking, beef burgers, psychology, and a bit of speaking.
I love it. The beef burgers really intrigued me at that time. And we've got our friends from the National Speaking Association on the call as well. Tim and Eva, they're both really good speakers and leaders in their own chapters, which is brilliant. Okay, let's turn the conversation now to S.U.M.O. Because when I first saw that, I thought you were a wrestler. I missed the dots because I'm a simple guy from the South. And I didn't understand what it was all about, but because I knew you, I bought the book and soon learned.
Yeah, S.U.M.O, I mean, it's very interesting. It's great that a couple of people are here from the NSA. I went to the NSA, the one and only time I mean was in 2002 in Orlando. And I met a lady who sadly has passed away in the last few months called Chris Clark Epstein. And one of the things that she talked to me about was about the power of finding what your brand was and how, anyway, she just gave me some good ideas and good indicators on maybe how to discover my brand. But S.U.M.O came about because I was actually running a course on coaching and counselling skills. And apologies for people who are from Scotland, but I'm doing this event in Glasgow. And at some stage, someone on the course goes, if all else fails, you can tell people to S.U.M.O. And everyone looks at this person and they went, what does S.U.M.O mean? He went, shut up, move on. And in a sense, what happened then, Derek, and the rest of it is, it was like someone gave me a seed with this little acronym, S.U.M.O, shut up and move on. And over time, I just decided to take this seed and to plant it and to water it and to feed it and to see it grow and then take little cuttings and develop this brand. So in 2002, I started to use the phrase. It became an umbrella term to describe a lot of different ideas that I already had. I realized branding was really important, and Chris Clark Epstein had made me aware of that. Will Kintish also helped me to make sure that I definitely used my humor and didn't tell too many sad stories, which I was prone to doing. And the book came out in 2005. What was interesting was it's not a business book, it's a personal development book. But a big bookstore in the UK, most of you will know, it's called W.H. Smith's. They made it their business book of the month, which, as I say, a bit bizarre because it's not a business book. And it went on to become a Sunday Times bestseller. And it's opened a lot of doors, including one big one as mentioned. And on the back of the book, I got to speak at a conference in Australia. And there was various people on the bill, but the guy who spoke before me was Stephen Covey, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Got a chance to speak to him before we both spoke, told him about S.U.M.O. He told me about his 9 kids and 52 grandchildren. And the big lesson I learned from that was you need to have a subscription for Netflix, or else who knows what will happen in your family life. And yeah, it's opened a few doors along the way. And the only reason I got invited to speak at that conference initially was because someone had read the book.
Fantastic. Well, actually, Tim Durkin, who you might want to connect with later, has actually worked with and for Stephen Covey as well, and knew Stephen really well. I think it's past tense now, sadly, as well. So that's fantastic. So you're on your 13th book. How do you manage to write so many books, Paul? Because I've written a few books, but it drives me bonkers sitting down to write, because I'm a speaker and you're a speaker. I know that, but how do you discipline yourself to do it?
I mean, I've written 12 books. The 13th comes out in June, and the first 11 were adult books, which normally gets people's interest. People start leaning forward with a bit more interest. When I say adult books, I don't mean 50 Shades of Grey. I mean, books for adults. And the 12th one, by the way, which I'm going to give a plug for, because I think young people, is called Yes, the S.U.M.O Secrets to Being a Positive, Confident Teenager. And
hold that a bit straighter, Paul. We can't see it.
Okay, all right. And I'll tell you, it's been incredibly well produced because you wanted to make it visually appealing for young people. But when you say, how do you, I don't know, I'm not like, I've got a friend of mine who'll go off to his little cottage, or someone else goes to his villa in Spain. I've got a goal, it needs to be done, get on and do it. And literally, I could have a half hour spare waiting for my flight, and I think, right, here's a chance to edit the book, or here's a chance to just get another idea. So yes, it's about discipline. I'm a morning person, and I started writing the last book, which is for young people. I put it in my diary. It was 6 minutes past 5 on January the 14th last year. And I just do a lot of work in the morning, and I'm very, I can snatch half an hour here and an hour there. I don't need a whole day. I'm very good at just snatching time. And, we know the reality, don't we? If you really want to do something, you find a way. And if you don't, you find an excuse. Well, I really wanted to get some books out, like How Not to Worry, Self-Confidence, How to Succeed with People, and S.U.M.O. And you find a way. And yeah, that's what I do.
What time do you start in the mornings, Paul? Because I'm a morning person as well, and I'm just curious about.
Often, I like it. I mean, I wouldn't normally start much before 5 a.m., but by the amount of work I can have got done and writing with the odd little break before 9 a.m. is phenomenal. And that's when I try and do it. But then I could be, when we were traveling, I could be in a Premier Inn. And those of you who follow me on social media know I love my Premier Inns. And I'll just turn up to the hotel and I'll think, right, I booked dinner for an hour. Let's just write for half an hour, or let's just edit and then have a shower and have my dinner. As I say, I'm very good at thinking, okay, let's use this time now wisely. I think people can procrastinate. And I'm a great believer in crappy first drafts. It's just about downloading stuff. I do a lot of research to begin with. I marinate my ideas. I spend time designing the book in terms of chapters and structures, and then I just get on with it.
You set an alarm to get up at 5 o'clock when you set that goal?
No.
Okay.
No.
Brilliant.
No.
Brilliant. We don't need alarm clocks, do we? They're to actually
The
alarm.
thing is also, when you're passionate about something, which people in this meeting will be, and when I'm burning with an idea that I just need to get out of me and get out there, then if I wake up at 4:30, there is no way I'm going to go, I'll just try and get another half hour. If I wake up at 4:30, it's like, boom, adrenaline's released, time to go. Now, sometimes I wake up at 5, but when I am in that book writing mode, I live it, I eat it, I sleep it, and yet also I then turn up and speak at conferences as well. But you could argue that maybe some of my family time there is a slight sacrifice in terms of family.
Okay, now turning the subject to psychology, you've done a lot of work with sports teams, and particularly one Arsenal superstar player who is a hero of mine, and I must turn the subject to Patrick Vieira. For those of you who don't know, Patrick Vieira was instrumental in Arsenal winning the Premiership on 2 occasions, cup finals and all sorts of things. An awesome midfield player, and you've worked with him, Paul.
Tell he's also a French World Cup winner as well, which you'll probably want you to know. Patrick finished his playing career at Manchester City, and here's something which is interesting to think about, whether into football or soccer or not. There's a concept often in sport, but it can play its part in business, called cultural architects. And that is that you have people in an organization, and you have them not just because of their ability to do the job, but their ability to influence other people. And when Patrick Vieira was signed by Manchester City, there was a sense in which he became a cultural architect, because Manchester City had spent well over 30 or 40 years without having won the title. And all of a sudden, they had a player in the changing room who knew what winning was about and knew what winning the Premier League was about. He didn't play a whole host of games for Manchester City, but he had an impact on those around him. There was a winner in the changing room. And after he retired, he explored a number of different things of what he wanted to do. And one of them, they was given an option, was to get into football, into coaching. And I've been involved with Manchester City since 2010. Why? Because someone read my S.U.M.O book and gave the book to a guy who worked at City, who at the time was head of player care and support. He loved the book, he loved the ideas. He said, I don't really want to call you a sports psychologist, but I reckon you can help the players with stuff that's going on in their heads and off the pitch in their personal lives. And if we can get their heads right, and if we can help them with the stuff going on that's going on off the pitch, maybe that could help them on the pitch. And I always remember when there was still various people at City had to be persuaded, and I will come back to Patrick, I promise, shortly, but they had to be persuaded why they should use me, why I should be involved. And I was just going to be on a monthly retainer. And I remember the guy who was the head of player care and support at the time said, look, what if we win the title by 1 point? And maybe something that Paul said or helped a player just meant that player played with more confidence or felt more relaxed on the pitch because he knew some stuff in his personal life was being sorted. He might be the difference, along with lots of other things, for winning the title by 1 point. Manchester City, when they won the title, didn't win it by 1 point. They won it on goal difference. And I don't want in any way to claim any credit for what happened at all. I'd be embarrassed to do so. But to quote the famous philosopher, Dotti, who in 1993 took part in a Tesco's advert, and the strap line that's been used ever since, every little helps. And I think they talk about now marginal gains, don't they? And I think, and the Kaizen principle within business. And I just think at the time, Manchester City were looking for all kinds of ideas that could give them the edge. Every little helps. When Patrick Vieira took on the role of being a coach, the club just asked me to get alongside him, not to help him with any tactics, but to help him with how he got the best out of his players and also how he got the best out of his staff. And to Patrick's credit, a World Cup winner, he'd won FA Cups, he'd won Premier League championships, and yet he was like a sponge, and he was prepared to listen to me.
Wow. And so what did you do? So you were with Patrick Vieira at that point, were you, Paul? I slightly lost the timeline then. So you started your Manchester
City. Involved in 2010. Let's say it was about 2013, 14. He took on his role as a coach, and I was asked by the club just to get alongside him. It wasn't a permanent role. It was a month. You know, I would probably only go into the team. I'd probably visit once, maybe twice a week. I'd go to certain games. I'd be in the changing room before kickoff. I got to know his physios, his coaches, and in a sense, sometimes you influence the influencers. So although there was players who I'd get alongside, some of them I didn't get alongside so well. But what you do is you spend time with the support staff and Patrick, and he'd run ideas past me. They talk about various things, and sometimes the players, they all had my mobile number, or a number of them did, and it was like, can we have a chat away from the training ground? And I'd just have these one-to-ones, and it was not so much just being a sports psychologist, it was being a confidant, it was being a different voice to a family member who were often very emotionally involved. And I could bring that objectivity and also hopefully a bit of wisdom to help the players. And sometimes Patrick was like, look, I've got to get the team ready for Saturday, but I've got this person who's got a real issue with their girlfriend or has got a real issue with their confidence because they've just played badly. Can you get alongside them? And for me, it was all about relationships. So I'd watch them training in the flipping rain, in the snow. I'd join them in the canteen and have lunch with them. So I built up this relationship. So when players talk to me, it wasn't a case of we talked to you and we got a problem. I became, you know, very much I wouldn't say part of the furniture, but pretty close to that.
And Paul, did they trust you not to tell others, Patrick or whoever was the manager? I forget who the manager was in those.
Well, Patrick was the manager of the under-21s and was some of the first team.
Okay.
When I first went there, it was Mancini, and then it was Pellegrini. And I worked with some of the first team players as well. Yeah, the thing that was quite interesting was, again, you build trust, and that is about being present. That's not being locked up in an office and going, if you've got a problem, come and see me. The players start to see you in on the training pitch, you know, and help him put out the cones and see you in all types of weather. Then we're just chatting casually over lunch. And yes, they get to trust you. But what was always important was when I had a conversation with someone, I would always be saying, okay, so-and-so's asked me to have a chat with you, or you've asked to speak to me. Someone might ask how it went. So what we will agree is everything is confidential. But at the end of the meeting, we will agree, what are you happy for me to talk about? And what don't you want me to talk about to anybody else? Because sometimes people are going, oh, no, it's not confidential. I'm happy to tell you this and don't mind if the boss knows. Now, the thing was, if I broke confidentiality, my role at that club is completely ruined. So people got to trust me. Now, in the end, in 2015, City said, we've set up a psychology department. We don't need you anymore. And yet, I still was invited by certain players, members of staff, to be there because I didn't have the Manchester City official, uniform on, so to speak. And they trusted me. I'm not saying they didn't trust the psychology department, but they knew the psychology department were employees of the club, where I wasn't. And I had a track record and people trusted me.
Yeah, that is absolutely vital, because I work with a rugby club, and they had a psychologist, and the psychologist was listening to the conversations and telling the coach everything that happened, which I found was pretty disingenuous, actually. But I imagine that's part of their job.
Yeah, and in fact, sorry, I just saw one comment. I think it was from Gabrielle or someone about, as an external, You don't have any hidden agenda. Gabrielle, you were spot on, 100% spot on that. You know, and I would sometimes I would challenge the odd multi-million-pound footballer. But the fact was, you know, I just felt comfortable to be able to do that because I didn't have any other agenda. And if he didn't like what I was saying, no problem. And also, to be honest, you know, if the club decided we're no longer going to pay a monthly retainer, I wasn't desperate for their business. I'd already worked with them. I'd already got the credibility of working with them. It wasn't that I need the money. So, Gabrielle, that's really spot on. I just could get that. No agenda. I'm not here to play politics with anyone. I'll tell it you as it is.
In negotiation terms, Paul, you had a really powerful walk-away position, which is what everybody does need when they're negotiating or when they're being truthful, etc. Did you ever say to anybody, because this is a real hot topic at the moment in football, did you ever say to anybody, you're not really trying, you're only here for the money, or something similar?
No. And the thing is, with football, we've got to be very careful. It's like you can talk about religion and say, let's say Christians, you go, oh, Christians are like this. It's like, hang on a minute, there's over 2 billion of them on the planet. How can you say Christians are like this? It's very subjective, and people use lazy generalizations to describe people. And I think actually they can do that about footballers as well, because they can just label footballers as greedy and you're just in it for the money. I met some really great people in football. I'm still in contact with a guy now who won't mind me mentioning his name. He's now at Burnley. Man City let him go. He's now captain of Burnley. His name is Ben Mee, and just an outstanding individual, and not someone who is, you know, just simply there for the money. Shay Given, who was a goalkeeper who played predominantly at Newcastle United, but also ended up at Manchester City and then Aston Villa. He, you know, him and his wife at the time, they raised loads of money for Macmillan Cancer. James Milner, who was at City but now at Liverpool, again, set up a foundation to raise all kinds of money. So no, I didn't ever have to say that to any of the players. Maybe some of them were like that, but not the ones I came across. There were some cracking people there. Not saying they were all saints or were always amazing in every situation, but there was a lot of really good people. And Brian Marwood, who had a role at Manchester City, said this to me. He said, players will come to this club, young players and older ones. And one thing we want to do is to make them better players. He said, my other goal is they leave here as better humans. And I just think that's worth thinking about. And I think a lot of organizations and sporting organizations are trying to be a bit more holistic in how they help people, not just to perform in the sport, but also become better humans as well. Because from a cultural point of view, that breeds success.
Oh, fantastic. Remind me who Brian Marwood was?
Brian Marwood, I forget what his exact role was, but Manchester City, they had their own club. They had New York City. They had a team in Japan. They had Melbourne City. So they were kind of quite an expansive brand. And Brian Marwood was involved in a very more managerial level, at operational level, and would oversee some of the clubs around the world as well. But he was the one that said, I want you to get alongside Patrick.
Okay, yeah, no, I remember it. Of course, the club, that company that you're talking about is, of course, owned by the Abu Dhabi royal family, I think, isn't it? Isn't that?
It is indeed. And again, from a, you know, what was interesting when Manchester City's stadium was built and their training ground, you know, in what was a deprived area of Manchester, in East Manchester, you know, as the actual owners did seek, as the ground was being developed, look, can we make sure we're using people locally? We create jobs for people who are local to the area. And it has, you know, reinvigorated the area a great deal. And I think they will. I mean, at the end of the day, I'm a Wigan Athletic fan. And the last time Manchester City lost a cup final was in 2013 to Wigan Athletic. Up the Ticks!
I remember that. Yeah.
But the fact is, you know, I'm not seeing this as I'm a devoted Manchester City fan, and I'm no longer on a monthly retainer. And they will, like any club, make mistakes because they're made up of people. But I think there's a lot of good intentions in that club and many other clubs as well. Norwich City are another club who hugely impressed me with what they're doing, and some of the stuff that's happening at Man United and at Liverpool, probably across the board as well. So yeah, there's some football, and I understand with what's happened with the European Super League, can be very much every just one's now. It's all about money. Money plays a huge part. It's entertainment, but there are some decent people operating football with some great values.
No, absolutely. It's a really big business. And I did go to watch Arsenal play at Manchester City. Sadly, we lost 5-0. But walking from Piccadilly Station to the ground, I could see what an amazing difference that they had made to that area. And I do remember that area because I used to go up to Manchester to see one of my clients, Great Universal Stores. And I remember it was an awful area round there, and they'd done a brilliant job. So that all made sense. Paul, your 13th book comes out in June. It's called The Happiness Revolution. That's a change from what I would call away motivation, S.U.M.O, towards motivation for the NLPers in the audience. But why did you change tack?
Well, I don't know. Don't credit me with too much intelligence and strategy. I mean, I did an event, a leadership event this morning, Derek, for the NHS. And the guy who introduced me meant this as a compliment, went, Paul's books and talks are really good. You won't be intellectually challenged. And he meant that as a compliment. Thanks for the feedback. I'm the guy that won't intellectually challenge you. I wasn't thinking about away motivation or towards motivation. I just came up with some titles. So How Not to Worry. Another book was just called Self-Confidence. Another book was called How to Succeed with People. So this one, we wrestled. It's the first book I've ever done with another guy. All my books previously have just been me, the author, but I've co-authored this one with a guy called Andy Cope, Dr. Andy Cope. And we wrestled with a lot of different ideas, but I don't think towards motivation or away motivation ever came into it. But in the end, we came up with The Happiness Revolution, a manifesto for living your best life.
Paul, you've got a great sense of humour. I don't think you needed a sense of humour to say this book is not intellectually challenged. Oh dear, did that ruin your morning? No.
Well, do you know what? No, it didn't, because I'm going to read something out to you that I got as a message on Instagram. Right today, let's just make it all live. So somebody called Victoria messages me, and then she goes, thanks for your session. I usually find myself snoozing through these drink sessions, but I'm so glad I turned up. Your humor, though, kept it entertaining. All the content was relatable, and as stated at the start, was not intellectually challenging, which I'm praising the Lord for, because all I ever want is to sit through real life examples instead of textbook ones that have no relevance. You certainly made a difference today. So I reckon, because I'm a visiting professor, right, at the University of Chester, I reckon I must be the only professor on the planet who will never intellectually challenge you about anything. But Tina, you're dead right. Never use a long word when a short one will do. I would totally agree with that.
We'll come to the chat box in a minute, Paul, but as a football fan like mad, and as somebody that studied high achievers from NLP, modelling high achievers, Pep Guardiola has to be the best manager ever, probably, in football, from his success at Barcelona, Bayern Munich, and now Manchester City. And Michel Arteta, of course, the Arsenal manager, went to be his understudy, which I thought was a brilliant idea for Michel. But you were behind them in the queue, weren't you, at the Manchester City training ground, trying to get some lunch at one stage, and they taught you.
Yeah, let me just tell you very quickly, because again, there's a leadership lesson in this. Pep Guardiola knew he was going to come to Manchester City like a couple of months in advance. It was a done deal. It was all sorted. It was out in the public. During the summer, before they all returned from the end of the season, I think the Euros had happened, and Raheem Sterling hadn't had a great tournament for England. From what I gather, listening to other people, so don't quote me on this, but the people at the club, Pep was straight on to Raheem going, I'm going to make you a better player. I will make you a better player. Don't worry about what's happened with England in this tournament in the Euros. Was it in whatever Euros was? I think it might be in 2016. Yeah. Out in France. And so I'll make you a better player. Secondly, I was told this, I don't know if it's apocryphal, I don't believe it is, that before he joined the club, that Pep Guardiola got the names and I think even a little pen, maybe a little picture and the names and 2 lines about every person who worked in the training centre, the first team training centre, include all the backroom staff, including the people who wash the players' kits, so that by the time he turns up on day one at the training centre, he knows everybody's name and he knows things about them. And there was one woman who worked there who said, Pep Guardiola has used my first name more times in the first 7 days than I've had mentioned by any other manager in the previous 7 years. So it's about making people feel important. Everybody's important. I've got this phrase, everybody's mad, everyone makes a difference. Now, at one stage in their old training ground, City had a little library, and the only books were in the library were my books. So when I met Pep and Michel, I didn't have an appointment with them, but I was actually at the training ground around about 2018, 2019, with a book that I've had called How to Have a Great Life. And I was giving it out to various people. I knew the sports analyst there, the head of sports science. They're big fans of my book. And basically I see Pep and Michel walk into the canteen. I was actually sat down having some food, but I'd just given a book away. And they go, basically, what's that? I went, it's a book I've written. And they went, oh, could I have a look? And then Michel goes, oh, do you have any spare? Could I have one? And I went, yeah, of course you could. And then Pep goes, and what about me? And I went, well, you've got a great life, haven't you already? He says, yeah, but how do you know? Maybe I can always get better. And he picked up the book as well. And I know that his daughter, we sent his daughter, who was about, I think it's about 14, a copy of this book, and she really loved it as well. So I just want to make it a slight, when anyone knows something's being given away for free, however rich you might be, it's like, oh, I'm curious, what am I missing out on? But I do think people like and I don't know if they ever read the book. I'm not going to try and give anyone any bull here. I've no idea whether they did. But I do know that both our guys are, again, a bit like Patrick Vieira, constantly open to learning. And maybe they picked up a little idea or insight from the book, who knows? But again, one of the things I'm really conscious of, Derek, I don't want to give this impression, that I've done anything for Manchester City that helped me be successful. I was one of many people, and then maybe I helped 1 or 2 people along the way. And I'm not going to say that, I know some of the staff read the books and find them helpful, but I'm not going to claim that Pep Guardiola read it and loved it, and Michel did, and I have no idea. But I do know they've got the book. Who knows?
I think it's a fantastic quote, though, from Guardiola. How do you know I've got a happy life? Because you never know what pressure these people are on. It's very lonely, isn't it? The higher you go up the leadership ladder, whoever you are, whatever business you're in, the more lonely it gets. We talked, didn't we, about the importance of a number 2, Paul, last week when we had our rehearsal. We talked about Brian Clough. Brian Clough was nobody without Peter Taylor. And if you look at Jose Mourinho now, he's been sacked twice because he hasn't had his number 2 with him.
I think we often put people on a pedestal, don't we, as a leader? And very much a lot of it is about their successes down to the culture they've created and the people who are around them in the team. And although some of you won't know who Brian Clough is, maybe our American friends, but he was this amazing manager. But if you look at his track record, he was always successful when he had this guy, Peter Taylor, as his number 2. And in fact, when he was on his own, the team that he'd achieved loads of success, they were relegated when he was managing them on his own. And I think there's a lot to be said for, I still think we like to put people on pedestals. And I think it's about the team. It really is. And it's often about those unseen heroes and unsung heroes that can make the real difference. Absolutely. By the way, talk about having a support team. Mancini, on the day that Man City played QPR, where they needed to win or better Man United's result to win the title, he's got from a Catholic background, he's Italian, and apparently he visited church that morning, so he wanted to get God on his side. But we need support in whatever way it is, and I think it's about having the humility to an open-mindedness to do that.
Absolutely. The broadband's not quite coming through at the moment, Paul, but I think it's okay. I'm going to go to the chat box and pick out some some questions for you. There's one about, do you know the difference, our American friends know the difference between a hamburger and a beef burger, but I'm not sure how relevant that is. Norman and John and Godfrey, who's not on today, are great supporters of Southampton. They want you to send a box of books down to Southampton as quick as you can get them down there.
What? Just to interject, when Clive Woodward took on a role at Southampton, when Rupert Lowe was the chairman, Clive Woodward invited me to spend a bit of time with him and with some of the backroom staff, and actually did a session for them. But then lots of things changed, and before you knew it, Clive Woodward had left Southampton to become the elite performance director for the British Olympic Association. But I've actually had some contact with Southampton previously. And during lockdown, Brighton and Hove Albion asked me to do a talk on well-being and resilience for some of their players and staff.
Well, they're just about to stay up as well, aren't they? And Southampton were top of the league at one stage for about 10 minutes.
They were. Oh, and by the way, if you're a Southampton fan, Nigel Adkins is the nicest person on the planet, just so you know. And I'm in good contact with Nigel, who's now at Charlton. But I realise some people from abroad went, enough football, and talking about people we don't know. But again, maybe there's life lessons here about how you treat people.
Oh, I think there's some fantastic life lessons, and we can learn so much from sport, whatever sport it is, because as we talked about cycling, didn't we? We talked about cycling earlier, or you led into
marginal gains, yeah.
Marginal gains. The trouble
Although with the cycling, I don't know, is it become a bit of a dodgy topic now when we talk about cycling? Because now we're talking about, well, yeah, marginal gains and a bit of bullying and a bit of drugs might have helped as well. Who knows? I don't know. I'm not sure if anything's been proven. But it's a bit sad, really, what seems to have happened a little bit in cycling.
Yeah, I think so
the waters have become a little bit murkier in the last few months. But I'm sure there's loads that have achieved, and some amazing people, and marginal gains played a part in it. I just feel that some people now might, when we mention cycling, might be a little bit more sceptical than they might have been 12 months ago.
Yeah, I think so. I definitely think so. Right, questions, Paul. Who paid you when you worked with Manchester City, the players or the club?
The club did. They just paid me a monthly retainer.
Okay, and from Amy, did the ME ever surface again? What is your overarching why now?
Yeah, I think, well, there were times, Amy, when I've definitely had a virus and thought, oh my days, is the ME or the chronic fatigue syndrome returning? And because it was the kind of thing that I would improve and then relapse and improve and relapse, it took me several years to wonder whether it would ever come back. And I had COVID-19 hit me pretty hard last March. And that one of the things associated with that is extreme fatigue. And I just thought, is it going to re-trigger the ME, the chronic fatigue syndrome? But it never did. And my why, I just feel, and again, I'm 56 years old, and you've got, the first part of my career in my business. Remember, I was on what was then called invalidity benefit. I got £35 a fortnight to live on. And, it was tough. And I just worked incredibly hard to begin with, and was all about, achieve. Maybe as I've got older, I've had a chance to reflect a bit more. And I just think that we've got a privilege to be on this planet, apart whatever anthropologists or people you listen to say that Homo sapiens have been on this planet roughly 200,000 years. There's about 100 billion of them that have lived, of which we are, currently 7.8 billion currently alive. And none of our ancestors before us have ever had the opportunities that we've had, and life is still a privilege, and I just don't want to waste this privilege. Yes, hopefully we are coming out of a global pandemic, but actually we've got so much to be incredibly thankful for. And I think every time, Abraham Heschel was a Jewish philosopher and writer, and he says, live each day in radical amazement. And that's kind of what I want to do. Part of my why is just to, I've got this little phrase: if you woke up feeling tired and miserable, just remember this: you woke up. And I like to live life in radical amazement and just be grateful for the opportunities I've got. We're very good in Britain at slagging our country off, but I think I'm fortunate that I was born in this country. I think I'm fortunate that we live in an era where we've got to know about, technology and the internet. And in 2007, iPhones are released. In 2005, YouTube starts. What an amazing time to be alive. It really is. Even in this pandemic, it is a freaking amazing time to be alive. And I don't want to waste the opportunity.
Absolutely, Paul. Well said. Brilliantly said. A couple of quick football questions. Did any players approach you when their contracts were not going to be renewed or placed on the transfer list?
Players, I've kept in contact with several after they've left the club, but I was never involved in anything about negotiation. I mean, one of the things that I would get alongside certain players who'd been injured, because what the club was very good at doing, like most clubs, is right, we'll get you the best surgeon in Europe or on the planet to operate on that knee. But there's all the psychology around the grieving, in a sense, around I might be out for a year and all that sort of thing. So I got involved in that sort of things, but not in contract negotiations. But what's great, again, is that some players who were there left for other clubs, but we kept in contact.
Any agents? Did you talk to any agents?
No, I haven't. I remember once being mistaken for an agent because I walked into the old training ground. I'd just been on holiday. I was very brown. I was wearing this navy shirt, one thing or another, and someone thought I was an Italian agent, but I wasn't. And also, Kelechi Iheanacho, who's now doing pretty well at Leicester City.
Yes.
I beat him at pool when he was at Man City. He ain't good at pool, but he's pretty good at scoring goals. And again, that's an example, not of, so sit down, tell me about your childhood, but do you fancy a game of pool? And whilst we were playing pool, we started to chat.
Yeah, well done. Just reading down the questions. But what I'm going to do now, Paul, is I'm going to bring it to a close and thank you. I'm going to turn the recording off, but I'll ask you to stay on and ask any questions. But for the recording, would you hold up a couple of copies of your books and tell people how they can get hold of you?
Yeah, the one that most people might have heard of is called S.U.M.O, Shut Up and Move On. By the way, when we use it as a program in schools and with some organizations, there's an alternative definition to S.U.M.O, which is stop, understand, move on. And the book, yeah, for young people, that's one which actually loads of adults are reading as well because they like lots of the visuals. Yes, the S.U.M.O secrets to being a positive, confident teenager, although it seems that children from the age of 9 are really getting a lot from that book, and schools are buying it, literally sales of, can we have 100, can we have 200, trying to help support children, especially at this time.
What a fantastic message, Paul, and there's lots of good comments in the chat box. In fact, fantastic comments, but it's interesting about the power of names, isn't it, and using the power of names, and we've talked about that on the program so many times. And in fact, I sent someone an email at the university where I'm working with saying, my name's Derek. If you address me as hi or hello, you won't get the right reaction. I felt a bit guilty about that, but just names are so important. As Will and I have discussed on so many times, Dale Carnegie's book with Tim and everybody else. Paul McGee, thanks very much for joining us. If you're watching this on YouTube or watching this on the Negotiators podcast, please like it or comment on it and contact Paul McGee or myself at any time. Thanks for watching.